for another season. We took a much needed break to rest and brainstorm and create and rest some more because, I really want to show up to this space and to all the things. So super excited to be back with another season to discuss all of the ins and outs of daily life. Speaking of which, today's conversation, we are going to dig into a new approach to finding more in daily life. And so we're going to talk about what it means to find more, right? And we're going to talk about what this new approach is and how we can start today. So first, a little framing. So back in August, I really felt strongly as the month started that it was supposed to be a month of living. And you're probably thinking, well, duh, Danae, what else would you be doing? But I really felt it was a month of just living intentionally. And the more I sat with it, it unraveled to this experiment of sorts where I kind of felt this pull to really find the more in the day-to-day, right? Peeling back these layers and just finding the dream, the goal, the beauty, the sacred in the middle of a really menial or mundane task. And y'all, it was really interesting. I zoomed in really fast and I knew going in it would be challenging, right? I knew this would be it wouldn't be easy. I knew it would take effort because I move on autopilot a lot. And I think, in general, we probably all move on autopilot. We kind of just do all the things and we don't really think about it. And this experiment really required thinking about what I was doing and being aware of it. And so I was aware that would be challenging, but y'all, it was real hard. The first week I was wow, this is challenging. And so, my approach when I first jumped into this concept was let me just hone in on these very specific tasks that I consider mundane in my day-to-day and find the more, right? It was really elusive and really big. And honestly, a lot of pressure. And so after my first week, I was okay, that was hard. And I don't really feel anything happened, right? And so I decided to take a moment, take a step back and just sat with what does it mean, right? What does it mean to find the more? And what does this actually look like in daily life? And in zooming out, I found this new approach and that's what we're going to talk about. All right, because we love definitions over here at This Wondrous Life, I've been tossing around finding more in daily life, but what does that even mean, right? Sounds interesting. I'm curious, but Danae, how do we define this? How do we put language to this concept? So when I say finding more in daily life, I like to define it as this pursuit of peeling back the layers of our daily life and discovering, encountering, and even indulging in the good, the beautiful, the gold that lies there, right? What we discover when we peel back these layers. And it's honestly at its root, finding more in the daily life is living aware and connected to yourself and to the world around you. I'm a firm believer that there's more to the mundane, right? There is more to our daily life than meets the eye, and that we can find the dream, new ones and old ones, in the midst of our daily life, right? I believe we can find the sacred and the tender and the intimate just in the ebb and flow of how our life moves in a given day. And so I don't think we have to sit and wait for perfect moments or opportunities for those things to happen. So that's finding more, right? It's going on this pursuit of finding the dream in front of you, of finding joy and beauty and good with what's in front of you, and really living aware and connected to the moment in front of you and to your life in the given season that you're in. So when I leaned into this experiment, that's kind of what I was trying to do, right? I wanted to, for instance, I hate washing dishes. It is my least favorite thing to do. And it's an everyday thing. I wanted to, instead of it being a thing that I dreaded doing, right? I wanted to see what could I find here that's good, right? What could I find here that's beautiful? How could I touch the sacred in the midst of washing dishes and all of those things, right? And so that was the approach. That's what I was trying to go for. And, I really zoomed in on one task and like really trying to figure it all out with one task. And it was a lot of pressure and kind of like, it was just hard, honestly. And, you know, I realized like maybe I'm skipping some steps here. Like maybe I need to just pause for a second, zoom out, take a step back, and like really see what this is all about. And so I really had to go to that place of like, this seems like a good concept, but how do I like practically do this? Because what I was trying for a week was not it, okay? So like, what does this actually look like? How do I actually do this? And y'all, turned out to be way simpler than I thought and even how I was making it. And so when I zoomed out, I realized like that was it, right? The way to do it is to take a step back, to not get too focused on one thing, but to kind of zoom out for the big picture and to ask these 3 questions. These 3 questions, it's first, what's the invitation for today? The second question is, where can I find the invitation in this moment? And the third question is, what did I learn from this invitation today? That was it. Like, those are the 3 questions. Like, you zoom out, right? So instead of honing in on like one task or one piece of your daily life, you're kind of looking at your day, right? And you're entering your day like with these 3 questions in front of you. And so, you know, I realized like in asking these questions, you know, I realized like, oh, this is it. Like the point isn't just focusing on one piece of your daily life and peeling it back and finding what lies under it, but it's actually going about your day with this perspective. And so the way that I approach this, I first would wake up asking that question, what's the invitation for today? And I kind of let myself ruminate on it. I did not necessarily go with the first thing I sensed or heard or felt. You know, I went through my morning routine and kind of just ruminated over it, right? Like, what's the invitation? If I felt something, I kind of probed it, right? Kind of let it unravel a bit as I moved about my morning. But before I would go into like my first task of the day, I would like nail it down, right? I would open up my journal and just say like, this is the invitation for today. This is what I'm leaning into. This is what I'm seeking out, right? And so for instance, one of the days, like the invitation, it was rest, right? And that was like the first thing that I'd heard. And I was like, okay, cool. But like, what about rest, right? Like, is this a physical rest? Like, hey, listen to your body, take naps, slow down, don't add on any other tasks, etc. Or was this like a different kind of rest? And the more I sat with it, it unraveled to like reflect a rest that wasn't necessarily physical, but it was almost like a pausing, right? I like to think of it in the terms of music, and I may totally jack this up. So if you are a musical person, I do apologize. But I kind of thought of it as like the musical rests between notes, right? Like you're kind of pausing before you go on to the next thing, and it's acknowledging what's just transpired and also like stepping into what's next. And so, you know, I felt like that was what rest meant for me that day, you know? And so that was invitation. I wrote it down, and I also wrote it on sticky notes. It was important to write down like what the invitation was and like placing it strategically around my home. And so that was where the second question came in, right? It was asking, okay, where can I find the invitation in this moment? Where can I find rest in this moment? And so I would actually write the second question on a sticky note and place it in very, you know, intentional places in my home. So for me, that was like my cork board that's by my nightstand. It was over the sink in the kitchen. It was on my desk, my creative working desk. And so throughout that day, whenever I went into the kitchen, I was rinsing out a glass, I saw that, and it gave me like this prompting to like pause and be like, where can I find rest in this moment? And it was so interesting, y'all, because I realized like when I did that, my body would respond to it. And I found that I would just like find myself taking deep breaths and like stopping, pausing, taking a few deep breaths, grounding myself before moving on to the next thing. It was really cool to witness. And so that was what I would do with the second question. And that's kind of what I did throughout my first week of like trying this new approach, you know. And then the third question was, what did I learn? And so at the end of the day, you know, I have a journal practice. So I would sit with my journal and just write out, this is what I discovered. And, you know, the discoveries weren't always like necessarily something new. Sometimes it was like, wow, I realized like I struggle with this, or I gained a new perspective on that, you know. But it was really helpful, right? Like asking these questions and kind of keeping them in front of me. And so yeah, that's like the new approach, right? It's zooming out and it's approaching finding more from a day perspective versus a task perspective. And it's realizing that like each new day, there's an invitation that's on the table for us to tap into. We have the choice, right? Whether we're going to pick up the invitation, accept the invitation, lean into it or not. But there's always something that each day is offering us that we can lean into and stand in. So how do you start? And better yet, like what's the benefit of this new approach, right? What's the benefit of this practice? So I would say first, like a benefit to finding more in our daily life and like going on that pursuit of peeling back the layers is that one, we become more aware and intentional with what's in front of us, right? Like I said early on, it's really easy to move through life on autopilot and, to just wake up years later, like, how did I get here? And like, who am I? And like, what is my life, right? And I think when we decide to really pursue the more in our daily life and peel back layers and find the dream and the sacred and the tender and all of the good, like in what's in front of us, we become more aware and intentional and grounded in what's in front of us and with the life that we have. I think also it fights off destination disease. I think when we allow ourselves to become aware and intentional and find the more where we are, we don't become so hung up on just getting on to the next thing, but that we can actually like find contentment and fulfillment right where we are. This does not mean that you shouldn't have dreams and you shouldn't have goals and you shouldn't pursue things, right? Like you still do that, but you're also able to find what's good in front of you and be rooted in that gratitude, which is another benefit, right? You would have a perspective of gratitude that leads your life versus not gratitude. And I would say another benefit is that you can become more inquisitive with your life and you kind of build in an inquisitive practice and perspective as you approach your day-to-day. So those are just a couple benefits to going on that pursuit of finding more in your daily life, and particularly with the approach of zooming out and entering each day and moving through each day asking those 3 questions. So how do you start? If you've listened to any podcast here, if you have read any blog post, you know how I feel that everything starts with a decision. And so I think it's the same with this, like make the decision, decide like, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try this approach of finding more in my daily life. And I think another way is to start and just start with like one day at a time, right? Or start with 1 week. Don't, do more than you feel you can. So start small and build from there. That's another thing we believe very strongly here. And so start tomorrow, right? Honestly, you could start after listening to this episode, right? You can just start with asking like, what's the invitation for today? And maybe that's all you ask for a week, right? And allow yourself to get used to asking yourself and sitting with and pondering the invitation for a given day. Maybe the next week it's asking that, what's the invitation? And then asking the second question. I think that's just how you start is just starting. And it's starting with asking those questions and giving yourself permission to find and lean into an invitation in a given day. If you are listening, if you are watching this and you have this desire to go on that journey of finding more within your daily life, do it. I fully back and support you. I do not believe slow living or even just finding the more in our daily life has to be overly complicated. I know at one point in my life, it felt overly complicated and I tried to do a lot of things all at once versus just pacing it out and starting small and building from there. I just really feel that we can all lean into a more paced life and find fulfillment in that. And, I believe we can embrace a paced life and indulge in all the beautiful layers that make up our day to day. I believe we can find old and new dreams in the middle of washing dishes or running errands. I believe we can encounter the sacred and the tender and the intimate as we care for our families and fold laundry. Those pieces, right? Finding dreams, resurrecting dreams, touching the sacred and knowing the intimate and beautiful, they aren't just for ideal or special occasions, right? Like we actually get to tap into those things in our day to day. And I think it starts here with zooming out and choosing an inquisitive and curious approach to daily life. We are absolutely 100% capable of tapping into the more in our life right here, right now. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's conversation as we dove into unpacking a new approach to finding more in daily life. As always, it is a joy to have this moment of connection with you. I look forward to having more conversations over coffee with you. Till next time, friends.